Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. They took my wife from our home, sick, recovering from heart surgery, and locked her in a van like a criminal. No warrant, no warning, just a clipboard and a power trip. But they forgot one thing. You don't mess with a man who's got nothing left to lose. The morning sun was just starting to spill over the rooftops when I helped Rachel out of the car. She winced with every step, her breath shallow and her hands trembling as I steadied her up the porch. The doctors had cleared her discharge only yesterday. After nearly 3 weeks in post-op recovery, her chest stitched together with what felt like hope and duct tape. She was still pale, still weak, still breathing like every inhale had to be negotiated with God. But she wanted to be home. She deserved to be home. And I was damn proud to bring her there. Our house sat at the edge of the cul-de-sac like a quiet old lion. Modest, yes, but solid. Brick and bone. Nothing fancy. Bought it outright 5 years back. Every damn dollar earned by calloused hands and long hours in a mechanic's shop that smelled like gasoline and regrets. Rachel loved it here. She kept a little herb garden by the kitchen window and called the backyard her green chapel. Now she was barely able to walk 10 steps without my arm. I settled her gently onto the couch, propping up her legs on a pillow the way the nurse had shown me. She smiled at me, soft and tired, and whispered, "Go to work, Danny. I'll be fine." I kissed her forehead and pretended to believe her. Truth was, I didn't want to leave, but we couldn't afford another unpaid day. I'd already burned through all my vacation, my emergency days, and then some. A nurse was scheduled to stop by before noon to check her vitals, help her with medication, and make sure she didn't try to go rearranging bookshelves out of stubbornness. She promised me she'd call if anything felt off. I told her I'd be back by 6. I was barely out the driveway when I noticed Linda standing at the far end of the street, arms crossed, lips pursed like she was sucking lemons through a straw. Her pearls gleamed like judgment in the morning sun. President of the HOA, queen of everything not fun, and possessor of the world's most punchable resting face. We'd had our spats. Something about me not submitting paint color approvals, and her trying to fine me for having unsanctioned solar panels that weren't even visible from the street. I didn't have the time or patience for her HOA nonsense. My lot wasn't even supposed to fall under HOA jurisdiction, or so I'd been told when I bought it, but Linda had always believed otherwise. She watched me leave that morning like a vulture watches a dying coyote. I didn't wave. She didn't blink. Traffic was light. The shop was quiet. I spent the morning tuning a transmission and thinking about Rachel, if she'd eaten, if she remembered to take her blood thinner, if she'd slept. I texted around 11 but got no answer. Not that unusual. She probably fell asleep or had the TV too loud to hear the phone. Still, I had that cold little itch in the back of my skull, the kind that knows when something's off before the rest of you catches up. At 11:35, my phone buzzed. "Danny, they're at the house. HOA, 2 men. They're telling me I'm not allowed to be here. They say I'm not on file. They're asking for ID. They won't listen. Danny, please come. I don't feel good." I froze, grease still on my hands. My heart stopped, then slammed into high gear. I read the message twice. Then again, I bolted. I didn't tell my boss. I just dropped the wrench, jumped in my truck, and floored it out of the lot. Red lights became suggestions. My mind raced with possibilities. They're at the house. Who? What the hell were they doing with my wife? She just got out of the hospital. What kind of deranged power trip were these HOA bastards on? I called her. No answer. I called again. Voicemail. I called the nurse scheduled for today. She hadn't made it yet. I called the house landline. Busy. 40 minutes. That's how long it would take me. In perfect traffic. 38 if I risked a ticket. 30 if I ran a few signs and didn't care about my license. Every minute was a fist to the gut. What the hell were they doing? I tried calling the HOA office. A receptionist told me that Linda was in the field. When I asked where exactly the field was, she hung up on me. 10 minutes into the drive, I got a text from a neighbor, Angela, sweet old lady who always walked her beagle past our house. "Danny, is everything okay? I saw Rachel being taken out of the house. She didn't look well. I thought she was just going to the hospital again. Should I call someone?" My chest burned. Taken out? Who the hell takes someone out of their own home? I called Angela. She didn't pick up either, probably scared. Probably watched it all go down and felt helpless. I gripped the wheel until my knuckles turned white. My mind was running laps. Had Linda somehow filed a false report? Claimed Rachel was trespassing. Was this a damn eviction? An impersonation scheme? How far could HOA lunatics even go? I didn't know, but I knew one thing. When I got there, I wasn't knocking on any doors. I was coming through them. By the time I was halfway home, I'd stopped thinking in words. My brain was just red static. All I could do was press the gas and pray that my engine didn't give out before I got there. Every mile felt like another goddamn insult. Rachel was sick. She had stitches across her chest that hadn't even healed yet, and some HOA goons thought they had the right to lay a hand on her. A block from the house, I slammed the brakes and rolled to a stop behind a white van I didn't recognize. No company markings, no license plates on the front, just a sun-faded magnet slapped on the side that said Community Compliance Transport Services. Sounded like a rebranded kidnapping squad. I cut the engine, jumped out, and ran the last 100 feet. Our front gate was chained shut with a bright yellow plastic sign zip-tied to the bars. Property under administrative review. No entry without authorization. HOA enforcement in progress. My gate, my house, my wife. Inside the yard stood 2 men, and Linda. One of the men was in a cheap suit and holding a clipboard like it made him God. The other was built like a refrigerator and wore a polo shirt tucked so tight it looked painted on. Linda, of course, had her arms folded and that look on her face like she'd just caught someone spray painting her azaleas. Rachel was nowhere in sight. "Where is she?" I shouted, gripping the bars. "Where's my wife?" The suit guy turned, startled, then tried to puff up like he was in control. "Sir, you need to remain calm. This is a restricted administrative action under HOA Emergency Policy Clause B7-16. I stared at him like he'd just recited the alphabet backwards. "The hell did you just say?" Linda stepped forward, smirking. "Mr. Carson, you're not currently authorized to be on this property. There was a complaint filed. An unregistered occupant was found in your home. She did not have ID, nor authorization from the HOA to reside on the premises. We've temporarily relocated her for evaluation and—" "You what?" I didn't remember jumping the gate, but I was over it and in their faces before I could think twice. The refrigerator stepped in front of me, arms out. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to step back. I'm going to have to ask you to eat shit." Linda flinched at that. The suit started talking into a little walkie clipped to his belt, like he was calling in backup from the Ministry of Bullshit. "You took my wife," I said, low and sharp. "She just got out of the hospital. She's recovering from open heart surgery. And you think it's appropriate to relocate her without medical personnel, without notice, without even talking to me?" Linda didn't blink. She resisted verification. We had to act in the interest of the community. "The bylaws." "Bite your bylaws." I shoved past the fridge man. He grabbed my arm. Reflex kicked in. I twisted free and drove my elbow into his ribs. Not hard, just enough to make a point. He stumbled back with a grunt but didn't fall. That's when I saw her. They had her in the van. The rear doors were still open and she was sitting on a narrow bench, pale as a ghost, her knees drawn up to her chest. One of the compliance officers stood in front of her like she was a flight risk. Her hair was matted, her face wet. Her arms hugged her stomach like she was freezing. My heart dropped out of my chest. "Rachel!" She looked up and blinked like she was waking up from a bad dream. Her lips moved, but I couldn't hear her. I charged. Fridge man tried to block me again. This time, I didn't pull the punch. Fist to jaw. He went down like a sack of dog food. The suit guy screamed something into his radio and stumbled backwards, dropping his clipboard. I reached the van and hauled the other guy, some greasy little weasel in khakis, out by the collar. He squealed like a kicked rat and fell on his ass in the gravel. "Danny," Rachel whispered. She looked so small. I climbed in, knelt in front of her. "I'm here. I've got you. You're okay now. I'm taking you home." "But we are home," she mumbled, confused. "Exactly." She tried to stand but winced. I carried her. As I stepped out of the van, someone shouted, "He's assaulting people! I'm calling the cops!" "Good," I barked. "Call them! I'll show them exactly who committed assault today." I walked past Linda. She backed away like I had rabies. "This is a violation of—" "Finish that sentence, and I'll violate every clipboard in a 5-mile radius." I carried Rachel through the gate. A small group of neighbors had gathered. Some had their phones out. Good. Let them film. Let the world see what community protection really looked like. I set her down gently on our porch. She leaned against me, breathing hard, like she'd just run a marathon with one lung. Then the sirens came. Red and blue strobes reflected off the windows as two squad cars pulled up. Officers climbed out, hands on their belts, eyes wide at the scene. I raised one hand in the air and pointed with the other. She was taken from her home, against her will. No warrant, no medical personnel. I want everyone responsible arrested, right now. The cops looked at each other. Then they looked at Linda, who suddenly had the decency to look nervous. One of the officers approached slowly. "Sir, we're going to need statements from everyone, please." "Fine," I snapped. "You'll get your statements. But she's staying right here. And if anyone tries to touch my wife again, there won't be enough bylaws in the world to stop what happens next." I hit the gas like the truck owed me rent, and I wanted it now. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the phone trying to dial Mike. He was my old army buddy, now a lawyer with a calm voice and a face like a disappointed dad. If anyone knew how to drag these HOA bastards through the dirt legally, it was him. He picked up on the second ring. "Danny?" "They took her," I said, trying to stay steady. "Rachel, the HOA took her out of the house. Claimed she wasn't authorized to be there." "Jesus Christ, is she okay?" "I don't know. I'm still 20 minutes out." I got a text, then nothing. I think they took her phone. I could hear him already scribbling something down. "Okay, listen to me. They don't have that authority, not unless they have a court order, and even then, they'd need law enforcement involvement. If they laid hands on her without legal cause, that's criminal, assault, unlawful eviction, maybe even kidnapping, depending on how far this went." My knuckles were white on the wheel. "What do I do when I get there?" "First, you film everything. If you see her, check for injuries. Record everything. If there's a cop present, demand they identify who authorized this. Do not swing unless they swing first. You understand me?" I exhaled through my teeth. "If someone touched her..." "I know. But you want revenge or justice?" "Both," I said, and hung up. I veered off the main road and made a pit stop at Wilson's Hardware. I must have looked like hell because the old guy behind the counter didn't say a word as I grabbed what I needed. Bolt cutters, gloves, a GoPro knockoff camera, a portable recorder, and a first aid kit. Tossed cash on the counter and ran back out. I didn't know if I was going to war or court, but I'd be ready for both. On the way back into the truck, I called Paul, retired firefighter, neighbor, and the only man I trusted to show up if things went south. He didn't ask questions. Just said, "Where do I meet you?" "Front gate, 5 minutes." I called one more person, Liz, our neighbor, and a registered nurse. "I need medical eyes on Rachel when I get her out. Can you come?" She was already getting her bag. I'm on my way. My hands finally stopped shaking. Focus kicked in like a second wind. I started narrating to the recorder clipped to my sun visor. Date, time, what happened, who I suspected, names, the HOA president Linda, the van, everything. I wanted a trail. Something no HOA paperwork could white out later. 10 minutes to go. I slowed down just enough to read the street signs. No sirens yet. No news. But I knew the vultures would start circling soon. I needed to get ahead of the story. So I went live. Not on Facebook, not Instagram. I wanted raw exposure. I fired up a live stream and pointed the camera at myself. My name is Daniel Carson. This morning, while I was at work, members of the Maple Hollow HOA forcibly removed my wife from our private home. She is recovering from open heart surgery. They did this without a court order, without medical personnel, and without notifying me. I am heading home now to get her back. If I don't make it, if something happens, this video is your proof. I ended it, posted it, and within 30 seconds my phone buzzed with notifications. Good. Let them come. I wanted witnesses. I wanted the world to watch the fire. 5 minutes out, I saw Paul's truck parked a block down from my place. He was already outside, arms crossed, eyes scanning. I gave him a quick nod. He handed me a crowbar and said, "Just in case they locked your front gate. Don't say I never get you anything. Appreciate it." He didn't smile. We walked up together. Liz arrived just as we did, wearing scrubs and carrying a full medical kit. She looked worried. "Do you know where they took her?" "If they're still stupid enough to be at my house, we'll find out real fast." As we turned the corner, I saw them. The van. Still there. The same van Angela had texted about earlier. Only now the rear doors were closed. No sight of Rachel. The gate had been changed. Where my black iron gate used to be was now wrapped in a chain and padlock, with a red plastic sign slapped over it like it was a biohazard zone. Access restricted pending HOA review. I laughed. Loud. Ugly. The kind of laugh you make when your soul is past tired and veering into rage. I handed Paul the crowbar and pulled out my phone. I filmed the gate. Then I film myself. Still think it's just an administrative measure? Behind me, a neighbor peeked from behind their curtain. Another was already recording me from across the street. Good, I waved at him. Smile. You're about to witness a felony unravel. I stepped forward and rattled the gate. Locked tight. Paul tested the chain with his hands. They were in a hurry. That's not professionally done. Probably used a bolt lock from the hardware store. Perfect. I stepped back and turned to Liz. If she's in that van, I'm going to get her. Can you be ready? She nodded. You got 10 minutes before I call an ambulance. Paul handed me the crowbar. Ready? I looked him dead in the eye. I've been ready since they took her. The squad car pulled up with just enough flare to make the situation worse. Sirens flared for half a second before shutting off, but the lights kept spinning like some kind of discount disco. 2 cops stepped out, one tall and lean, early 40s maybe, with a mustache that screamed, "I've been waiting my whole life for a situation like this." The other was younger, eyes darting nervously from the van to me, to the still twitching. Compliance goon I had knocked cold earlier. I stood with Rachel leaning against me, still pale and trembling, while Paul stood to my right, like a coiled spring. Liz hovered nearby, scanning Rachel's face with the quiet intensity only a nurse could pull off. Linda stepped forward with her clipboard raised like a damn crucifix. Officers, this man has assaulted 2 of my employees and is interfering with an active HOA enforcement action. The mustached officer turned to me. Sir, can you explain what's going on here? Yeah, I said, pointing at the van. These people broke into my private property, removed my wife, a post-op cardiac patient, against her will, detained her in that unmarked van, locked my property with a chain, and left no legal documents. I want them all arrested. Today. Rachel coughed, and Liz immediately put a hand on her shoulder, checking her pulse. She's dehydrated, Liz murmured. We need fluids and a clean bed. Fast. Linda scoffed. She was trespassing. There are HOA residency protocols. The board filed a temporary occupancy objection. We were well within our rights to... I cut her off. This house is deeded in my name. Rachel is my wife. We've lived here for over 5 years. And before you try to talk about bylaws, let me make it simple. This property is not even under HOA jurisdiction. You've been sending me letters and threats for years, and I've ignored them because they're meaningless. Today, you decided to escalate. That's going to cost you. Mustache took a step back. Hold on, not under HOA jurisdiction. Nope, I said, fishing the deed out of my back pocket. I handed it over, complete with the original property survey that clearly outlined the lot boundary as outside the Maple Hollow HOA development zone. While he read, the younger cop approached the van and opened the back door. He looked inside for a moment, then turned to his partner and muttered something that didn't sound like all clear. Mustache grunted and stepped toward Linda. Ma'am, we're going to need to speak with you and your associates separately. Linda stiffened. I'll have you know, this was a sanction. The younger cop chimed in, more forcefully than I expected. We're talking kidnapping, ma'am. You laid hands on a private citizen and detained her off-site without consent or legal authority. This isn't some HOA fine dispute. Linda's confidence cracked for the first time. She sputtered. But the board. We submitted an incident report. Paul leaned in toward me and whispered, You see that twitch in her left eye? That's the sound of someone realizing they just bought themselves a felony. Liz stepped forward. She needs rest, oxygen, and real care, not a lawn chair in the back of a van. The younger officer looked around, then lowered his voice. Sir, were you planning to file formal charges? I didn't even blink. Absolutely. Every damn charge that fits. I want them charged federally if I can help it. I've already sent a copy of this entire event to my lawyer, and by the way, we're live right now. I pointed to my phone, still filming from the porch. I've got over 100,000 views and counting, so if this gets swept under the rug's gonna burn. That landed hard. The officers both stiffened. I'd also like a paramedic here, I added. Because Rachel isn't just shaken, she's medically vulnerable, and they treated her like a trespassing dog. Unit 11, the mustached cop said into his shoulder mic. Roll EMS to Maple Hollow Lane. Priority 3. Female post-surgical distress. Linda tried again. I'll have our lawyers contact the board. You are the board, I barked. You orchestrated this. You can try to hide behind whatever HOA clause you made up, But you laid hands on a sick woman in her own home. That's not a bylaw violation. That's a damn felony. The ambulance arrived 10 minutes later. Rachel was reluctant to go, but Liz insisted. And I trusted Liz more than most doctors. Rachel gave me a weak squeeze before they loaded her in. I told her I'd follow close behind. She just nodded and mouthed, "Don't kill anyone." Paul clapped me on the back. "You're doing good, brother, but we're not done." "No," I said. "Not by a long shot." Linda and her stooges were huddled together on the curb now, arguing quietly while the cops took statements. I noticed that one of them, the guy I'd hit, was being helped to a stretcher by paramedics. I walked over. Mustache raised a hand. "Let's not escalate, sir." "I'm not escalating," I said calmly. "I'm informing. This is the last time I speak to her directly, unless it's across a courtroom. But she needs to hear it." He hesitated, then stepped aside. I looked Linda dead in the eyes. "You picked the wrong man, and you just declared war." She opened her mouth to respond, but for once no words came out. By the time I made it to the hospital, Rachel was stable. They had her hooked up to fluids, heart monitors chirping in rhythmic reassurance. Liz stayed by her side, holding her hand, whispering calm, while nurses fussed around like bees in sterile blue. I stood outside the room, fists clenched, forcing myself to breathe. I'd seen a lot of messed up things in my life. Roadside wrecks, bar fights, even a warehouse explosion back in my welding days. But nothing made my blood boil like seeing my wife in a hospital bed because a bunch of suburban tyrants thought their clipboard gave them authority over my home. Mike, my lawyer friend, showed up 20 minutes later with 2 coffees and a briefcase full of hell. "You look like you want to punch drywall," he said, handing me one of the cups. "I'd rather punch Linda's jaw," I muttered. He nodded. "Good. Let's redirect that energy." I filed an emergency protective injunction. It should be processed by this afternoon. Once approved, it bars any HOA member or affiliate from coming within 100 feet of you, Rachel, or your property. I took a slow breath. What about charges? We're filing criminal complaints against all 3 individuals who participated in the removal, Linda included. Unlawful entry, unlawful detainment, battery in Rachel's case, and if it sticks, conspiracy to commit a felony. Sounds good. Not done. He added, pulling out another folder. We're also filing a civil suit, damages, emotional distress, medical costs, loss of income, you name it. And I've got a buddy at the local paper. They're already sniffing the story. I couldn't help but smile. You're a dangerous man. Mike shrugged. I like justice with my coffee. I sat with Rachel for another hour. She was groggy but aware and angry in that quiet way she got when she was too tired to yell. "Promise me they won't get away with this," she whispered. "I already started the war," I said. "Now I'm just making sure we win it." When I got back home that evening, the street was buzzing. HOA meetings were usually sleepy affairs, held in some beige room behind the clubhouse with bad coffee and worse lighting. But now the clubhouse lot was packed. Cars lined both sides of the street, reporters loitered near the sidewalk, and 3 separate camera crews were circling like vultures who smelled scandal. I parked half a block away, grabbed the folder Mike gave me, and marched toward the entrance like I owned the place. Because damn it, I did. Paul met me outside. "You sure about this?" They kicked in my door. I'm kicking back. Inside, the HOA board, what was left of them, sat in a line like schoolchildren at a disciplinary hearing. Linda was absent, probably lawyering up. Her spot at the head of the table was conspicuously empty, nameplate turned face down like a silent admission of guilt. The new interim president, some weasel named Brent with the charisma of spoiled milk, cleared his throat as I walked in. "Mr. Carson, I understand emotions are high, but this isn't an appropriate forum for—" I slapped the folder on the table. "This is a formal demand to cease all HOA activity related to my property. Attached are the court documents proving I am outside your jurisdiction, as confirmed by county zoning. Also included are witness statements, timestamps, and a legal threat that will bankrupt this board if I so much as find another one of your flyers on my windshield." Brent flinched. "We understand the situation escalated in an unfortunate—" "Escalated," I cut in. "Your president orchestrated an unlawful raid on a recovering heart patient. You held my wife in a van like she was shoplifting at Walmart. You don't get to use passive voice now. Say it with your chest." A woman in the back murmured, "He's right." Someone else said, "Where is Linda anyway?" I looked around. You all sat quietly while this happened. Don't pretend you didn't know what she was capable of. She tried to fine me for planting unapproved sunflowers. This was inevitable. Brent fumbled through some papers. We're suspending all enforcement activities pending legal review. You'll suspend a hell of a lot more, I said, because as of this week, I'm running for HOA president. That shut the room up. Completely. One old guy near the end let out a stunned, "Well, I'll be damned." I nodded. I'm sick of watching petty tyrants bully this neighborhood. You let a handful of self-righteous clipboard addicts ruin lives. No more. I'm filing candidacy tonight. Brent tried to recover. You'd still need board approval. I have video, I said flatly, of everything. Try to stop me, and I'll make sure that video plays on every evening news channel from here to Tallahassee. The murmurs turned to applause. Actual applause. 2 people stood up. I'll vote for him, someone shouted. Me too, another added. Brent wilted like lettuce in the sun. I could smell his resignation. I left the building feeling lighter than I had in weeks. Outside, the cameras were still waiting. I walked right up to one. My name is Daniel Carson, I said, steady and clear. My wife was unlawfully removed from our home by an out-of-control HOA acting far beyond its legal authority. I intend to hold every single person involved accountable, and I'll make damn sure this never happens to another family again. 2 days passed, and silence settled over the neighborhood like fog, thick, unnatural, and full of teeth. No letters from the HOA, no emails. Not a single smug memo shoved into my mailbox about grass height regulations or porch clutter. It was the loudest silence I'd ever heard, but I knew better than to think they'd just given up. People like Linda don't vanish. They recoil. They rearm. Rachel was home by now and doing better. Liz stopped by twice a day to check vitals, change her bandages, and make sure no one from the HOA had tried to mail her anthrax in a sympathy card. Paul came by to install new cameras, real ones this time, not those fake plastic domes the HOA approved to discourage porch piracy. These had motion tracking, infrared, license plate recognition. If anyone so much as sneezed in our direction, I'd have a record of it in triplicate. Still, I kept waking up in the middle of the night, not from nightmares, from certainty. Something was coming. I didn't have to wait long. 3 days after the hospital, I got a letter. Hand-delivered, no postmark. It wasn't HOA branded either. This one was from a law firm I'd never heard of, Peterson and Blanche. Inside was a bland, passive-aggressive masterpiece. The HOA board was filing a cease and desist against me for defamation of character, incitement of civil unrest, and unauthorized publication of private board proceedings. I read it twice, then again, aloud. Paul nearly spit his coffee. "Let me get this straight," he said, grinning. "They kidnapped your wife, and now they're suing you because you embarrassed them?" "Sounds about right." Mike confirmed as much. "They're trying to shut you up before the next board vote. Typical tactic. They think you'll panic and back down." "Not happening." We went on the offensive. Mike counterfiled for discovery. That meant the HOA would have to produce all internal communications related to Rachel's removal, including texts, emails, and meeting notes. If Linda said, "We'll teach him a lesson in a group chat," we'd have it. Within 24 hours, they dropped the suit. But the silence returned. And then the signs started appearing. Not in my yard. They wouldn't be that stupid. No, the signs popped up around the neighborhood, on lampposts, bulletin boards, little passive-aggressive propaganda flyers printed in faux-friendly fonts. Concerned about community safety? They read, "Do we want someone violent representing our HOA?" I tore down the first one. By the next morning, 5 more had popped up. Someone was running a whisper campaign. And from the language, from the phrasing and smug insinuations, I didn't even need handwriting analysis to know it was Linda, or someone still loyal to her. Funny how quickly tyrants start playing the victim when the tables turn. So I did what I had to. I went door to door. Every house on our street got a knock. I showed them the hospital report, the footage, the legal filings. I didn't beg. I didn't rant. I explained, calm, steady, like a neighbor should. And it worked. At first, it was just nods. Then one of them, Mr. Harlan, retired Air Force, said, "I'll vouch for you. I've seen enough of that woman's crap." Then another, "You know, my son was fined for hanging a pride flag last year. I always suspected it was personal. By the end of the day, I had 16 confirmed votes." That was enough. I filed my candidacy officially, and the board couldn't block it. not without violating their own bylaws. Still, I wasn't naive. I knew Linda wouldn't sit this one out. She was hiding, but she wasn't gone. The next morning, I got a certified letter in the mail, not from the HOA, from the county zoning department. It said my shed violated new permit regulations. Funny, that shed had been there for 4 years. Guess who was suddenly filing anonymous zoning complaints? Election day for the HOA board started like any other Tuesday. Fake smiles, garbage trucks, and a breeze that carried the scent of desperation and cheap mulch. The clubhouse had been beautified for the occasion, which meant someone had wasted money on folding chairs, lukewarm coffee, and a plastic banner that read, "Preserving Maple Hollow's Future," like it was a political summit and not a suburban firing squad. I didn't wear a suit. I didn't need to. I wore jeans, a clean flannel, and the same boots I wore the day they took Rachel. Let them see the dirt. Let them remember. The voting opened at 8 sharp. The place filled quickly, more than I expected. Some folks came out of curiosity, some out of fear, but most came because they'd had enough. The smear campaign backfired. Those signs Linda had scattered like breadcrumbs, they'd pissed people off. Old Ms. Fuller down on Birch Lane said it best. If they're this scared of him getting on the board, maybe that's exactly where he needs to be. By noon, Brent, the Hollow interim president, looked like he was sweating through his soul. He kept shooting glances toward the door like Linda might crash through it any second with a subpoena or a flamethrower, but she didn't come. She sent someone. Right around 2 o'clock, a lawyer I'd never seen before strutted in like a man who charges by the syllable. He handed Brent a folder, whispered something into his ear, then left without ever looking my way. 5 minutes later, Brent stepped up to the mic and tapped it like it was the only power he had left. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, voice trembling just slightly, "there has been a late development. Due to concerns raised by our legal team, we are postponing the final vote for HOA president until an emergency board review can be conducted next week." The room erupted. Someone yelled, "Cowards!" and someone else threw a coffee cup that missed Brent by a foot and nailed the snack table. I stood. "Let me guess," I said loudly, stepping toward the mic. "Your legal team thinks I'm too much of a risk. Not because I did anything illegal, but because I won't play nice while you break your own rules." Brent tried to say something. I raised my hand and cut him off. "You postponed the vote, not canceled it, which means I'm still a candidate. And every person in this room will remember that you tried to run from democracy the second it stopped serving your comfort." A cheer went up. Brent turned pale. I walked out. I didn't need their stage. I had the people. That night, Rachel and I sat on the porch together. She was feeling stronger, color back in her face, fire back in her eyes. She watched the sun drop behind the rooftops with a small smile. "They're scared," she said softly. "Good," I replied. Then her smile faded. She looked at me, serious. "They're going to come harder." I nodded. "Let them." The next morning, someone tried to vandalize my truck. Sugar in the gas tank. Classic move. Problem is, I'd already replaced the fuel cap with a locking one. Paul's idea. The trail cam caught it all. Hoodie, gloves, cheap sneakers. I didn't even need to enhance the footage to see who it was. Linda's son. Not some random teenager. Not a punk. Her blood. He was arrested 2 hours later, and that's when the dam broke. Other neighbors started talking, sharing stories. Times they'd been harassed, fined, threatened. A couple even came forward with old screenshots, emails from Linda, bragging about making examples of certain families. Mike compiled everything into a formal complaint. We filed it with the county, the state HOA oversight board, and local media. By the end of the week, everyone knew. Linda wasn't just authoritarian, she was dangerous. And now she was cornered. I didn't sleep the night before the final hearing, not out of fear, out of anticipation. Because after all the humiliation, the threats, the kidnapping of my wife, the fake legal attacks, the petty vandalism, justice was finally coming. Not the kind you fantasize about with fists and broken fences, but the real kind. The kind with folders, signatures, and consequences. The kind that sticks. The county had scheduled an emergency hearing at the Civic Center, not some HOA clubhouse or neighborhood meeting room. This was official. Big room, public access, cameras allowed. And I made damn sure the cameras were rolling. Rachel came with me. She walked in on her own, leaning on my arm, dressed in a deep red coat that made her look like vengeance itself. Every step she took echoed louder than any accusation. Linda was already there, sitting stiff-backed in the front row with her attorney on one side and her son, now out on bail, on the other. She didn't turn when we entered. She didn't have to. She knew I was behind her. She could probably feel it in her bones. The board sat across a long table. Brent was sweating again, and for once I pitied the guy. He hadn't been the ringleader, just a coward in a bad sweater vest. The rest of the board looked like kids caught cheating on a test they didn't even study for. The presiding county officer, a sharp-eyed woman in a gray blazer, opened the proceedings with brisk professionalism. Today we're reviewing the conduct of the Maple Hollow Homeowners Association and its board members concerning a series of complaints, including unlawful detainment, abuse of authority, and zoning manipulation. Mike handled the formal side. He presented everything: timelines, video footage, testimony, documents, screenshots. He spoke with calm fury, a man who knew he had the truth and the law on his side. When he played the clip of Rachel being pulled from our house, slumped, scared, stitched together like a porcelain doll with wires, the room went completely silent. You could have heard a gavel drop or a career. Then came the neighbors. One after another, they stood to testify. A woman told the board about how Linda had fined her $200 for putting a basketball hoop on her driveway without visual harmony. A father described how the HOA refused to approve a wheelchair ramp for his son unless he paid an additional aesthetic compliance fee. Even the teenage girl from 3 houses down stood up and described how Linda threatened to call CPS because she was too loud on weekends. And then it was my turn. I didn't use notes, didn't need them. I stood by when Linda fined me for putting up the wrong mailbox. I laughed it off when she sent me letters about my truck's unapproved height. I ignored her threats, her false claims, her imaginary rules. But when she laid hands on my wife, when she took Rachel, a woman recovering from life-saving surgery, out of our home without a shred of legal authority, I stopped laughing. I paused. The room was dead still. I'm not just asking you to remove her from the board. I'm asking you to hold her accountable like any criminal would be, because that's what she is. A criminal with a clipboard. Linda's attorney tried to respond, tried to twist everything into a misunderstanding, a jurisdictional error, a series of unfortunate administrative missteps. But it didn't matter. The facts didn't lie. The hearing ended with a unanimous decision. Linda was permanently removed from the board, banned from any HOA involvement countywide, referred for criminal prosecution. Her actions were declared a gross violation of HOA authority, local zoning law, and multiple state civil codes. Her son faced separate charges for attempted sabotage. The rest of the board was dissolved. An emergency election was scheduled, and I won, easily. A week later, I stood in the same clubhouse where it had all started, facing my neighbors, not as a man fighting back, but as the new president of the board. My first order of business: no more closed-door meetings, no more fines without a vote, no more bullshit. We rewrote the charter, simplified the rules, restored people's property rights. And Rachel, she planted sunflowers. A whole row of them, bright and tall and defiantly yellow along the fence where Linda used to pace like a paranoid warden. Every morning, I drink my coffee on the porch and watch them sway. Every morning, I remember what happens when you fight back and win.